yeah, so, I can try to briefly introduce you, but obviously, too, welcome to add all kinds of things, details. At the high level, of course, I know you first through your Survios co-founder and president, which, of course, VR studio, for people who aren't familiar with Survios, they did Raw Data. That's the awesome kind of shooting the robots thing. Jeremy's a big fan as well. It's one of my favorite VR games. Sprint Vector, the Creed game, also, like, I got it packaged in my PS4 VR. Love it. Recently announced Walking Dead VR and Battle Wake, both at E3 this year, I believe, are by y'all. Probably, I think I'm even missing at least one, right? Is the music...
Electronauts.
Electronauts, yeah. Yeah, and then separate from that, part of what I love about this is you're one of these awesome examples of doing this enormous, big studio, especially for VR stuff, right? Licensed property, etc. And on the side, just doing your own indie stuff. Which I'm not sure how much you want to say or not about that. I don't want to give any details away besides what you're comfortable showing or sharing. It looks like it's open, so I'm hoping we get to see it because it's rad.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to talk about it. I can show some of the side stuff I'm working on, and then while I'm trying to get random stuff working, you should ask me questions.
Fair enough. Nice. Yeah, classic demoing while talking, which is a challenge we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to set up, first of all, Super Football.
Working title. Just on the side, I've been working on a football game. The easiest way to describe it. And it's exactly what you think it is. So basically, it's a two-player physics-based football game, and this is kind of the regular version. There's different versions of it and kind of like modalities, I guess you could say. But this is kind of the regular version or regular modality. And so you can see it's all it uses player physics. And it's very much in real time, and you can see there's instant plays as well. It's funny. So the announcer in the game is Merrill Reese, who. I took clips from the Eagles-Vikings game and then the Eagles-Patriots Super Bowl of his voice, and then that's basically the announcer. It's a side project I've been working on for a little while outside of Survios. It's very much kind of the opposite of what Survios does. It's a non-VR indie game, whereas what we focus on at Survios is like AAA VR games. I'm just doing it to learn and just to make something that I'm very interested in. You might hear some dogs in the background. We have some friends and dogs over. I kind of stupidly wrote my own animation and physics animation system for it, and it probably wasn't the best idea. It was a good learning experience, but I'm probably going to end up using some more off-the-shelf stuff because it was just too hard to kind of manage writing your own thing for it. But if any of you guys are interested in that, I can kind of show you what it was like to do that and then why you shouldn't.
Well, and actually, and I will say, even so to an extent, right, because we're a practice club, there's things that we do that are, frankly, we know we shouldn't do if our aim was to make a commercial thing, but like we want to learn how to write our animation system, even if it comes out worse, because now we got that experience. Chris was asking, speaking of which, like, so the playback engine with this like slow motion rewind stuff, is that custom coded by you? Is there some sort of built-in stuff that or off the shelf stuff you found?
No, that's all custom by me, and I can actually show that to you. If I unplug my controller, I can let the game play itself. So the AI will essentially play itself. There we go. So essentially, you can just kind of sit here and watch it. Sometimes I'll actually stream it on Twitch, where it's just playing a game, and I'll just kind of tune in every now and then and see who's winning, which is pretty fun. I wanted to make something that was efficient enough to run on the phone.
Star's asking about the Twitch thing. If I heard correctly, right? So basically, you'll set up the AI to play against itself, and then you just have that Twitch stream.
Right, exactly. So I'll just kind of leave it streaming. And it's kind of fun. It just streams all day. And so when the game gets more complex, what I like is making like a simulation and then trying to make it more complex, basically. And it's kind of you can see the complexity in the variation of what happens when you run the game, right? It's kind of a way to test your game to see how complex it is, basically.
Yeah, and autonomous Let's Play is kind of a fascinating whole space.
It really is, yeah. And then you can start, getting Twitch people to type commands, and that'll affect the game, right?
Yeah, if they can implement AI plug-in to compete or something, who knows?
Yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities. So you're right. It's definitely a very interesting field. Long story short, I have an AR version of this game, which I think is pretty interesting. And I wanted to share the screen of that to kind of give people an understanding of that, because it's kind of a whole new area. Anyway, if you want to ask me any questions while I get this.
Sure. Yeah. And I want to say just as a contrast, right? This is consistent too with our small teams. Unity is what we use for a lot of our intermediate advanced stuff. JavaScript on Canvas, like I saw earlier meetings, are kind of intro, more kind of DOS classic NES, SNES era kind of stuff. But if I'm not mistaken, Survios for your AAA large team VR stuff, that's Unreal Tech, right? You're all around
Right.
Unreal House?
Yeah, and I can tell you, like I said, I got all sorts of crazy stories and just interesting kind of tidbits about Survios and how we've developed things. But basically, when it became free, we were using Unity at the time, and we were trying to do, networking and all sorts of complex stuff. We had all these gripes about it, and then Unreal comes out for free, and we're like, we knew at that moment that if we were going to switch to Unreal, the time to switch was right then. So we kind of had to make the quick decision one way or the other, and we made the decision then to switch to Unreal and started building full-time Apex in Unreal, which is what led to raw data. And we carried over a lot of the philosophies of our development that we had in Unity into how we were doing things in Unreal.
Speaking of, I keep referring to it as a large studio, and for me, I picture something very specific because I've been to, like, there have been parties over there and after events and other stuff, so I'm very familiar with the setting. But if you want to kind of just paint people a picture of studio size, right, for VR AAA, what kind of team size or company size, approximately?
There's a lot of ways of doing game development, but for us, so Survios it's a company that's it's inside of a 17,000 square foot hangar, basically, right? And we have 125 people, roughly. And basically, we have teams that are kind of like they rotate from project to project. Our character team, for example, everyone on the character modeling and animation and rigging side kind of ends up being like a multi-project team, so to speak. They're more service oriented, and then you have the actual games teams themselves, which there's usually a few going at any given time, and those are you have a project champion and a producer, and then you have a lead engineer, lead artist, lead designer, and then usually it's kind of built around that, and then the team ramps up or ramps down as necessary. And then people kind of float on working on multiple projects at once. So that's kind of how we maintain, like, we want to make a stable studio. We don't want to make a studio that's like 3 people and then 30 contractors, right? Or between 0 and 30 contractors, right? We want to make a studio that has stability and is a community, right? So that's kind of why we designed it that way, or kind of evolved to that point.
It actually sounds like, and obviously I've got no visibility to what goes on in there, but it actually sounds a little bit like, somewhat like what we do in the club, obviously at a whole different scale and level,
Yeah.
but where there's like the same animators are hopping between 2 or 3 different projects, and it's not, there's like, this is that team, they're only on that, this is that team, they're on that, which is part of why it's fascinating when you all announce 2 massive games simultaneously at E3.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're constantly working on multiple projects. We definitely, we're a studio that, we raised a bunch of VC funding and we grew, and we're pretty big now, and we got to make some games. We got to sell some games, right? So we're making games. We're making a ton of content, and there's deals we're working on constantly, and we're always working with partners. And we're not the kind of company that there's 2 different game development methodologies. One's more agile, and one's not. And we're definitely more on an agile camp. But it's like agile, but also like corporate, I guess, like IP and kind of like very high quality, right? So it's an interesting combination. It's a little more like a studio or an agency, like a typical LA agency in that style, but we're a game development studio. We're not some like advertising company or something. So we're like a weird blend. Whereas a lot of more AAA game developers, they're working on a game for like 4 years, with a giant team, maybe the size of our entire company. So that's definitely not our style. We're a little bit more agile than that.
And yeah, when you mentioned like a long-term project stuff, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is Benson Russell still one of y'all's designers? I know he at least used to be. I'm not sure if he still is.
I think Benson is no longer at the company, but he was at the company for a bit. I think a bit over a year.
Gotcha.
About 2 years actually. Time flies.
Yeah, I just want to mention him because for folks that don't remember, Benson Russell was a guest speaker for us maybe a year or 2 ago. Former also AAA I'd met long ago, and Airborne and so on. So yeah, it's very much it's AAA designers, AAA engineers, that kind of stuff. So which Terrence is asking, so for another game, he's familiar with some Sony PSVR stuff where they had paired programming, one in VR, coding in engine. Do y'all do paired programming? Are there people kind of testing stuff in engine on device while someone else is working on it? Like, is there anything that kind of process thing you can speak to? I don't want to get too specific if any of this would be.
Yeah, I mean, the general answer, everything's pretty ad hoc, so I don't think we're not that dogmatic with process down to that low level. There are programmers working together. You could call it paired programming, but I don't think it's any kind of specific structure. It's a little bit more freeform. Usually everybody has a really good PC with 2 large monitors and a headset at their desk. Pretty much everyone has the same standardized setup. And then we have a lot of internal tools that we've developed to make the development process as easy as possible.
Gotcha. Yeah. Jeremy's also asking about anything about basically sickness, and in part for development related sickness. being in VR while someone's making changes or any of that kind of stuff going on. And I asked this too, is because I partly know obviously like, development builds, right, are often nowhere near as optimized as when it's consumer ready with a high FPS and people have had a chance to. Is that a part of the logistical challenge of being in VR at AAA, or not so much an issue? It comes up.
I mean, we're developing on PCs for the most part, and it's a challenge to start our development on like the Oculus Quest or something to make sure we're kind of staying within that frame rate kind of initially. But Jeremy, to your question, we're not really developing while in VR, right? We're developing and then we put the headset on for testing. One of the most important things with VR, honestly, is you can make a lot of the game outside of VR, that you have a first-person controller on your character that allows you to do all the interactions you're able to do in VR for the purposes of testing, and then you kind of put the headset on and take it off. So you usually always kind of have it on the top of your head like John Carmack. Like that's kind of, what you end up doing. You're just kind of wearing it all the time. It's like a weird crown or hat or something. Yeah, actually, what you guys do reminds me of Hit Record, if you know Hit Record.
I don't, but now I feel like I should.
It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's company. They are like an online like sharing platform, or not sharing, like collaboration platform for filmmaking, right? You guys are kind of like that for games, I would say. It's a lot of similarities.
Nice. I'm going to use the heck out of that. That's that's a really
cool. This is what I was talking about with Puppet Master, and I'd love to go into technical details about some of this stuff too. But let me start the screen share on my other one now.
It's a kind of a starter question. So you mentioned Puppet Master. Is it like an asset store thing? Is it some built into Unity thing?
It is very much an asset store thing.
I was going to just add it because of his logistical note. Part of, like I mentioned too, like in Gamkedo Club, we'd rather do our own stuff, even if it's worse because we learn the process. We actually don't use any asset stuff stored in our games. That's kind of a practice philosophy, but still absolutely curious to hear about its potential, its capabilities, what you do with it, how useful it's been. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I think, what is an asset or what is not, or what is a tool or what is not. To me, all those lines are blurred at this point. It's actually harder for me to learn how to use someone else's tool than it is to write my own. So I have to push myself to actually use the tools. But anyway, Puppet Master is a physics animation system where basically you can pretty much bring any model and rig into the scene and make it into a puppet and have it interact in a dynamic physical animation sense. So think like Gang Beasts or FIFA, or I'm trying to think other games that use, like the old kind of like truck dismount and things like that.
Yeah, Chris was mentioning Tabs, right? This is totally accurate battle simulator. Yeah, and that is certainly, part of what says about your game, right? Is you've got these clearly animated characters who also just are so floppy and wiggly when they smash into each other. It's not quite ragdoll. It's not quite pre-rigged animation. It's like this weird blend in the middle, right?
Yeah, well, here, check this out. It's all about settings. The ability to do that. So this is the system that I want to use. So this is 24 football players all just like trying to get this one guy, and I can actually move around in the scene. So you can see all of this running. And they're all just animating. All they're doing is doing a simple animation walking directly at this dummy. And he's a little more stable than they are, so he can like stand up and try to fight them. He's doing a punching animation, so he's just kind of like fighting them.
Jeremy has pointed out this basically looks like rugby, and Anthony's pointed out it is sort of Matrix Reloaded-esque, but this is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much getting the fundamental systems for realistic simulation working is the way I like to look at it, and building that tool set and that toolbox, so to speak. I got this working like a few hours after downloading the plugin, and it was very, very easy. And so these models, the football guys, are from Cinti Studios and their pack. So it's very easy to add virtually any model to it and get it working. And so I actually have this scene running at 60 frames per second on my phone with 24 individual rigs all doing this, and all just like with tons of physics simulation. So it's very efficient the way they've written it.
It's also kind of a mosh pit party scene going on here. But
yeah, it is.
Throw some lights in there, disco ball. Like I said, part of what I think is so cool about what you're doing is you can simultaneously both wear that AAA hat where like everything's got to look essentially cinema grade visuals and animations and so on, and on the side realize that like for your indie design space in Unity, it can be a very, very different beast. Keeping it high level, keeping it conceptual, keeping it fun and playful.
I'm not that old. I honestly don't have that much game industry experience, so it's great what we do at Survios, but I still have other things that I want to do, and I kind of can't leave the company to just go make some indie games, so I'll just make them on the side. Is kind of the idea.
And actually, speaking of which, one of the things we always like to hit on too, we kind of, I think this case jumps straight into like, this football game's amazing, is a bit of backstory, right? As to, I think, did you go to USC, if I recall, about like which years, or basically kind of what your pathway was into the kind of stuff you're doing today?
I mean, I can give you guys the whole story, the whole spiel. Awesome. Hello, America. All right, so basically, you can see the game on my phone, and I'll wait for it to load. If I zoom in like this, you can see I'm actually moving the camera around in the AR scene.
You are the ESPN drone.
Yeah, pretty much. And you're able to move around the scene in a lot of cool ways when you kind of play that way. Let me see if I can just like, I'm actually going to go ahead and play. You always have the ability to move the camera around. And so you can kind of, see what this guy's doing or see what's going on in the formation or that sort of thing. And then when you actually start playing, the key to that is to be able to, move it around while you're playing. And then keep the camera moving automatically when the ball moves. So it's not a fixed camera. It actually is a camera that moves, that has movement as well. It's combining those two movements. So you see when the ball's in the air, the camera moves and you can watch, boom, you get that awesome replay, right? So you're actually controlling the replay. And the idea is you can record the replay. And then of course you can record it mixed into reality and have your friend dancing or acting goofy in the background while you're recording something. And then you can share that.
People standing around like breakdancing with like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of, every game should have that kind of like mobile sharing like thing that can help make it go viral. And so
there's now an enormous dog in the background of your football game.
Oh yeah. Oh, is Finn back there? Let's see. Is he on? There you
yeah.
Hey, Finn. Finn dog. Puffy.
Hi, Finn dog.
Hey Finn, I'm on a podcast, buddy. Podcast.
Keep it down back there, Finn.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, let's see here. Oh yeah, so and I also have a camera reset like button. So see if can I go deep? So yeah, let's watch the replay on that one. So you see I can zoom in, kind of see what happened. One of the last things I want to do with this, I want to take video of your face from your phone, right? From the perspective that the camera sees your face from while you're playing. Isolate your face and mux it onto the screen. And so the video you record of you playing will also have the replay specifically will have a replay of your facial reaction muxed onto the video. So you see your own face go, oh, like your reaction to the play as it occurred in the replay. And then basically take that and then you share that. This is the kind of stuff I just want to experiment with. I used to be a mobile developer. I wrote the Cocos 2D cookbook back in the day. So it's kind of like unfinished business for me to mess around with the phone more.
What was the thread too? You mentioned backstory as to, so you wrote the Cocos 2D cookbook. You were in mobile development. What's your path been like into co-founding Survios?
So basically, I'll give you the whole story. I was in television radio at Ithaca College, and I switched to game development because I kind of always done game development when it was in high school, and it just felt better. I didn't like the kind of TVR school there as much as I thought I would. So switched to that, got a computer science degree, went to work in interactive television in New Jersey, in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm from Philadelphia originally. And basically, I was working there and my job got like super easy to the point where I really didn't have to like do it anymore. But I could kind of just like go there and get paid and kind of maybe do some like Linux administration.
Are they hiring? Just want to throw the question out there. I know it's a while ago.
They do not exist anymore. Probably for the best.
I guess I wonder how they ceased to exist.
It was a startup company. And at that point, I just started what I like to call sunlighting, which is when you work on something else, but you do it at your job. So moonlighting, right?
Right.
So basically I would just be there and be like, I might as well do something. So besides, the easy stuff that I was doing. So I started working on, I had an iPhone. I was their iPhone developer as well as a web developer and things like that. So I started working on a baseball game, actually. It was called Golden Age Baseball. And it was kind of like, the whole concept, which I'm honestly still a viable concept today, was Ken Burns baseball meets Ken Griffey Jr. baseball. And so it was like that style kind of video game. I started making this prototype for it, which turned out pretty well. As I was making it, I started blogging about it and all these little kind of like tidbits of like Cocos 2D iPhone stuff that I found online. And as I was blogging, someone saw one of my blog posts and It was a post that was just a list of like useful stuff for Cocos 2D, and they sent me an email and asked me if I was interested in writing the PAX Publishing book or Cocos 2D. They had written one, and it went well. And usually they'll write a book about here's how to get started, and then the second book it's usually like 100 recipes, like a recipe book, right? And so they wanted to see if I was interested in writing the recipe book, and if so, I could send them an outline. So I was like, yeah, sure. I put together an outline for what I thought the book could be, sent it to them, and they're like, this is great. We'd love to sign you to a publishing deal and have you write this book. And around that time, I was also looking at grad schools. And funny enough, I wasn't looking at game development grad schools. I was actually looking at Masters of Science in Computer Science grad schools to try to do like something legitimate with my life to make video games. And so I ended up like around that time, I was like, okay, this book sounds like a lot of fun. I'll go ahead and sign up for this publishing deal and start writing it. And it was funny because like the longest paper I'd ever written was 12 pages at that point. I think it was in high school or something. I didn't really write any long papers in college, but now I'm going to write this book, I guess, right? Around the same time, I was looking at schools, and the only game development school I actually applied to was USC for a master's program. Everything else was MSCS, mostly on the West Coast, but I knew I wanted to move to Los Angeles. And basically, I started writing that book, and I got into USC, and I kind of realized that it was kind of meant to be. I kind of had this like, I don't know, feeling of relief to know that that maybe this is really what I should be doing. So I was having fun working on the book. And so I worked on the book for the next like 8 months as my now wife and I moved across the country and packed everything up in my Kia Rio.
And just for timeline wise, kind of what year plus or minus? I mean, this was super early iPhone, right?
This is early. It was 2010.
Got it.
This is 2010. And so basically I wrote this book. It's called the Cocos 2D Cookbook. Ended up being like 450 pages. That's 100 recipes, all sorts of stuff from AI and audio and I don't know, palette swapping and art stuff and data. So it kind of goes over all the different pieces. And it was great. It was a way for me to use some of that like, video game knowledge that I had that I'm like, oh, what am I doing with all this knowledge about all these 2D games I used to play? Well, I can kind of put it all in this book. So anyway, ended up writing that and then moved to LA, went to USC and just kind of pick up the pace a little bit. Ended up working with Palmer Luckey there at the Mixed Reality Lab. Just kind of luckily, he was there working on head-mounted displays. I got hired there as a researcher to work on Microsoft Kinect stuff, I guess, and ended up writing a research paper and doing some stuff with that. And basically got into VR. Got exposed to VR through that lab. Ended up meeting James Isla through that, and James and I became friends pretty quickly and had a lot of shared kind of experiences, passions. We got together to start an advanced game project. We always wanted to start an advanced game project. And then when we started was Project Holodeck. I was the director and he was the producer. And basically the whole point of that was to build a 2-person wireless full body, easy to set up virtual reality system and then make a game for it. And the game was Wild Skies. And this is a game where 2 people, it was actually originally Palmer's idea, or his initial idea was like, you could put two people in VR on a steampunk airship. And I'm like, that's a great idea. And so that's the game that we made. And basically, because the idea is you're on a ship, so you can move around into space. Palmer understands VR very well. So his idea, I understood why he brought that up because it's a locomotion concept, right? 2 people are on a platform and they're not going to walk outside of that platform. They have to stay together. They can't have independent locomotion. But you put them on a ship, now they can fly around, go around, do whatever, right? And make it a steampunk airship because that's awesome. So, I kind of sewed everything together. So we made Wild Skies, which is kind of like, I like to say it's a game I still want to make like fully. This is a prototype, but I would say Skies of Arcadia meets Battlefield 1942 in VR is probably the best way to understand it. And so we made that game and it had all sorts of like wild systems that are still not really like, it was very innovative. Not only was the hardware system innovative where you had Razer Hydra controllers in your hands, this big helmet that I was like the main hardware person and kind of built this helmet that you could put PS Move stuff in. And we had a prototype head-mounted display and you had to wear a backpack with a laptop they were wearing with the whole thing. 2 of those were wireless connected to a router, which was then had a game server on. I would do VNC administration as well. So I'd VNC into the headsets to then set settings while people were wearing them, like waiting in, and then like kind of booting them up into the game. And then basically server was a spectator as well. And that spectator had its own dynamic camera that would act. So you could see the players in the game. That camera would kind of float around them. And then I had this thing called like the ship camera. It's kind of like the camera in Gran Turismo. Basically, as the ship was moving, it would spawn camera far out here. And then as the ship would fly past it, the camera would do like a automatic dolly zoom. So it would be like, you'd see like this really cool kind of camera angle. The menu scene of the game basically had the ship flying a course through a level, and it had the logo of the game and the start menu kind of come down and was visible to players on the ship. But the camera perspective was a flattened out camera where you could see the same elements would kind of appear in 2D and make it look like a normal like menu screen, like a normal video game presentation to people watching it. But it was actually an interactive menu screen to the people in VR. So I really like messing around with that spectator aspect of it. How do you film something that's going on in VR at the same time as people are already in VR? We did a lot of those things that honestly are still not even really done yet today.
Yeah, it's clear how it's kind of that's feeding a little bit back into your experimentation with Super Football and some of the AR stuff you're doing. And
yeah, it's kind of, I'm a person who likes to experiment. We made that, and then James and I got together. Basically, the project was this honestly mess of a project. We didn't really know how to recruit people properly. We were just, anyone who wanted to work on it, we're like, sure, come on, work on it. Just not what you want to do. And basically, we had like a team of like 40 people, most of whom didn't really know what they were doing. And by the time the project completed, it really boiled down to the four of us as the core contributors to it, which is myself, James, Alex, and Graham. Alex and Graham both being engineers, myself being an engineer generalist, and then James being a generalist as well, and kind of a designer and a creative, and basically, and a producer. And so essentially, the four of us together finished out the project, a lot of it in Graham's garage, because we needed time and space to build everything. We're able to maintain the IP from the project by signing agreements with everyone who worked on it to basically share a license to everything that was worked on with us and them. So just we had the ability to commercialize anything that we had made, which is an important legal IP thing. And then basically, the four of us started Survios with that to see if we could take the work we were doing and raise money with it so we could just honestly keep working. We had a family friend who had some potential investors that we talked to who were able to lock down $250,000 from after working on a business plan. I had a 100-page business plan. It's the last business plan I ever wrote, honestly. You don't end up writing business plans when you're raising real amounts of money, but the small amounts, for some reason, you do. And we had all this stuff together to start the company up. And what we were trying to build was a hardware platform for VR. And honestly, we ended up competing with Oculus and some of the other big companies, which is very, very difficult. But basically, we raised that money and we built a smaller prototype, which is like a little, almost looks like, the thing you slide out to catch ghosts in Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it looked just like that, but it was on your back. And it kind of had a cable that went up to a head mounted display, and it was a much smaller version. It actually used the Oculus HD, which was something that Laird was nice enough, their COO at Oculus, nice enough to let us borrow as a head mounted display that we could use. We made Zombies on the Holodeck with that, which was a really amazing and intense and terrifying VR experience back in 2014. It was probably the state of the art of VR experiences at that time. And basically, because there was no Vive, I mean, none of those things were even announced at that point. After having that demo ready to go, it was a single player demo. James and I went up to Silicon Valley, and we lived up in San Francisco for 3 months while we every single day basically worked our networks and met with VCs and pitched them on the company and everything that we were doing. And lucky for us, around that time, Oculus got acquired by Facebook. And so, basically Oculus gets acquired for $2 billion. All of a sudden VCs are like, wait, this is a thing. We need to invest in some VR companies. They look around, there's no VR companies, right? But we just happen to be in Silicon Valley pitching every single day to these VCs, right? So we're in the right place at the right time, with a great demo and a great team and all that. And we were able to secure $4 million in funding, came back down to LA and started building our hardware system, which, if we're punching above our weight there, we really try to punch above our weight with the hardware system that we built. Is honestly crazy. At the time, it was pretty good. This is like 3.5 years ago. We built a 1080p 60 hertz wireless head-mounted display. So you could just put it on, and it would wirelessly stream video from a game console that we built. That would stream video to the head-mounted display. We also had these controllers, which I wish I had here today, but you would. I still think they're the best controllers that you could use in VR. You could basically slide them onto your hand this way, and you can grip. You basically had a grip here and a trigger here, similar to the Oculus Touch. and then a joystick, once again similar to Oculus Touch. It was a little more like a gun handle is what it kind of looked like, but you could go like this and you wouldn't drop them. But they wouldn't hang either. They would just stay where they were because they had a strap on your hands, and they were actually very, very convenient and kind of comfortable for that. It also used magnetic tracking, so you could put your hands behind your back. It was entirely wireless, right? And you weren't, it was pretty light. It actually had one more thing too, which hasn't really been adopted, but we had something that you would wear here and put on your back, and it would do 3 DOF backtracking, and so you could get torso rotation versus hand rotation. So all that crazy IK that everyone has to have today wasn't really as necessary. So we could get much better body animation. But anyway, at the time we switched to Unreal as well, and we made a prototype game called Bullet Time Apex for that system, and then used that to then raise more money after that. But after raising more money, we ended up realizing that we were starting to lose the battle against people who were starting to make devices. Now, at that point, all the other devices started to get announced, and we realized that it would be better to switch the company to a software-only company, pursue that, because it was just so incredibly hard to we probably needed $100 or $200 million at least just to get the whole thing off the ground. And so we switched to software only and started developing raw data at that point, like 9 months later, and the early version of raw data comes out, early access, in 2016. So, and then I think after that, it's a story of growing the company. We're probably around 20 people at that point, 25 people, end up raising more money and growing into a multi-game, multi-project studio. And it's, just been, the whole thing's just been a wild ride.
Super awesome. Thank you for sharing so much. And I don't want to keep you over. I know, obviously, we promised we'd let you go. We got stuff after. If I can sneak in just 2 short questions, interesting timing about what was going on and where VCs were and where kind of timing worked out, etc. But basically your advice for, okay, now it's 2019 and someone's really eager to make VR games commercially. What advice you give them now as to like, hey, make sure, steps 1, 2, 3, or things to be aware of, or stuff to not miss out on, or...
I mean, if you really want to make games commercially for VR, and you're going to be really successful, go back in time. I hate to say it that way, but it's like, these are market opportunities and they like open and close, right? So they're open when a new piece of hardware comes out. But now that everyone's kind of like zeroed in on it, it's very competitive. You have companies like Sony and PlayStation who will launch new products, and you want to work with them on their product launch and kind of get into that as much as you possibly can. The problem is, of course, it is very much a corporate thing. You have to kind of be able to work closely with those companies. And as a small developer, it can be hard to kind of work your way into that conversation when you have a lot of other people doing it as well. But VR, I think, so my general advice is that the whole industry and industries in general, frankly, are driven by technological innovation, and I wouldn't say they're not driven by it. It's more like technological innovation wedges the window of opportunity open, and when the innovation is not there, the window is basically closed or shuts or shrinks. So if the industry is stagnant right now, then if you make a VR game, you're just like anybody else making a VR game. You have the same shot that anybody else has to sell that game. But if there's a new headset coming out that has new features in a year, then you can get in on the ground floor of those new features. So like AR is a good example, right? If an AR headset comes out tomorrow that actually doesn't suck, which would be great, then all of a sudden there's people scrambling to get the first, to be the doodle jump of that platform, right? But so to me, it's a gold rush to get to those new market opportunities when they happen, and you should understand where they are and hopefully be in the right place at the right time. Just like I was. I mean, I literally just like, hey, the entire new industry, let me just go work with the guy who started it. Like, I got kind of lucky.
But Tish,
you got to try to get lucky. I mean, if you want that advantage. So to me, it's like that advantage, and then the rest of it is just hard work and all the basics. But actually, another piece of advice I would give is to work with partners. Your product is usually only as successful as its partners. That includes its platform partners, its marketing partners, its influencers, and other game developers who are working on it, and people who paid money for it on Kickstarter, and all those people. Like, really, that's who they make or break a product and a product launch. So, and that's honestly the toughest part because every indie developer, including myself, wants to just close themselves up in a room and make whatever they want and just be like, this is my dream, you know? And ultimately, if that happens, it's just everybody doing that and no one's actually buying the game. So it's kind of, you have to understand what the market is and understand who those potential partners are.
Awesome. Oh, excellent. And then the final thing is actually a pretty short one. It's basically Twitter handles, company name is, spell it out for people to Google, check it out, find their games, check you out on Steam Store, PSVR, etc. And or also if any of your own presence online, your own Twitter handles, your own personal, if you have a website, etc. for your projects and things.
Yeah, it's survios.com, survios.com. I'm Nathan Burba, last name Burba on Twitter. And yeah, I'm not posting anything about my personal stuff right now, so this is kind of a little on the DL, but it's not, it's all purely like non-commercial right now anyway. But it's something I'm excited to share about. I'm excited to share more about the development process too. I think we're all, myself included, we're all trying to learn, right?
Okay, well, yeah, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Nathan. This has been rad. But yeah, aside from that, we've got a new pitch that just happened. I'll get those channels spun up. We just got Exit the Shadow posted online today. There's at least another Unity pitch coming up on this next weekend, and another pitch or two, like people mentioned in their How Was Your Weeks, that they are getting formulated. If anybody else wants to work on a pitch, we are still happy to bring on more of those. Sometimes it's a few weeks after we start meeting about it. But just schedule office hours with me, folks, and let's get those going. Thanks again, everybody, for being here, and see you all around the Slack. Bye, everybody. Bye.